It is unsurprising that the weight of the Scottish Government, which is, I think, sort of taken much more seriously these days, was put behind the position of, we really don't want this to happen. This is a democratic outrage. And if we can't stop it happening, then we're jolly well going to try and have our voice heard and make sure that the different kind of political and economic conditions in Scotland are taken into account during the negotiation period.
One of the reflections over the campaign itself was how analytics was used, how campaign tactics were used, and I think I haven't read Hillary Clinton's biography yet, but I understand within that, not biography, but her reflections on the campaign, there is a discussion about how data and analytics could be targeted and convince people and what should be done about that, whether there should be new rules, whether people need to get real. This is the new political reality we live and exist within. So control and power, how are we in this situation? Who was able to fund a campaign to get us into this situation? And how are we finding ourselves all in a situation now where our government would appear to be completely divided and paralysed by this subject?
The biggest threat to the EU isn't actually Brexit per se. It is the fact that the EU as an institution is increasingly out of touch with the populace in Europe. And I don't think it's just about immigration. It's about centralisation. It's about people being left out of the benefits of globalisation. And I think that's the key issue. And what happened with Brexit was that the elite in this country, the Europhiles, got totally out of touch with majority opinion in the UK as a whole.
The UK government is partly so overloaded, and partly it's showing up its attitude to Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland is just trying to say, well, we'll take it all, and then of course we'll talk to you, and you're going to get, a power bonanza, I think the Scottish Secretary Mundell called it. So I think it's exposing huge weaknesses in the way power is shared or not shared, or even how consultation happens across the four constituent parts of the UK. Normally, the Scottish Parliament at Holyrood ought to vote on the withdrawal bill. It's something called a legislative consent motion. At the moment, it's not clear. It's clear at the moment that the Scottish Government would not recommend voting to support that. The way devolution works, at the end of the day, Westminster could overrule, but that would cause a very big constitutional crisis. I think at the moment we've got a simmering constitutional and political crisis, and it's not come to the boil, but the politics up here, I think, is very, very different to the debates you're getting in England and in London.
What do we learn about power? Well, we learn that power still rests, in this case, very much with the UK government. So we see that as in the result. It wouldn't have mattered, frankly, if 90% of people in Scotland had voted to stay in and only 10% had voted to leave. If the UK as a whole had voted to come out, that's what would be happening. And so you can see where that sort of democratic outrage argument comes from. And I think it's quite legitimate to sort of say, well, as the government that represents Scotland, nearly 2/3 of us voted to stay in, and we are being taken out against our will. I think that's it's quite right for them. I mean, my argument is that they took that probably too far in terms of how it would affect our own constitutional relationship with the UK, with the rest of the UK. But you could see where that outrage came from.